right. So we upload those to the YouTube page or somewhere along there. So just to repeat this is the Community Health and Safety Task Force meeting for July 19th, 2022. All right, so did you have anything, Chris? Okay. I don't really have anything at the moment. I feel like we need to get into presentations right away, just to be cognizant of everybody's time. So I don't know if staff from the facilitator have anything to share, or we could also talk about anything that we need to cover at the end of the meeting.
Yep, we can do it at the end. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, sounds good. All right, presentations. First we have Sophie Andar, who is going to be presenting on the findings and recommendations from the City of Santa Fe Violence Prevention Research and Development Process. And Julie, did you want to start anything, or do you want to go ahead and let Sophie jump in?
Yeah, I can let Sophie jump in. So I'm going to have you share it via Zoom.
Oh,
okay, here we go.
Right?
Those disabled participant screen sharing. Are you able to?
Yeah.
I think I should mute myself to stop
There you
the
go.
feedback.
And all of you should have received both presentations ahead of time. And so it'll be good to refer back to that or when you have questions. And so just know that everybody received the presentations. So,
Okay, so sorry. I feel like I'm in 3 different dimensions. Okay. Julie, do you see where the slideshow shares?
So
Got it.
So you're-
Okay.
Are we on mute? Just checking.
there we go.
we got
it.
you.
Are you able to hear me? Yes. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you all. Most of you I've met, and for those of you who I haven't met, it's nice to meet you. My name is
You have to
Sophie.
sign.
Since last November, I had the privilege of working alongside Julie and coming into relationship with all kinds of folks in the community to gain a better understanding of what's going on locally with violence and to get a better sense of what we can do to prevent it. And this was really a continuation of work that had been going on pre-pandemic and was in part set in motion by the tragic killing of J.B. White and growing concerns around youth engaged in violence, especially with guns. So, you know, this what appears to be an increase in violence locally is definitely reflected in what we see nationally. You're probably all aware that, you know, there's been an increase in homicides, in in assault, and in hate crimes nationally. There has also been about a 30% increase in homicides in New Mexico. And then when looking to just the city of Santa Fe, last year we had 8 homicides, which was 5 more than the year before, and almost twice as many assaults. So thank you very much to Chief Joy for providing the data that you did. It was very helpful to help us set the context for this process. The way we went about this was really a participatory process, talking with all kinds of folks with firsthand experience surviving violence or behaving violently in the past. Also people who are in first response or crisis response type roles, supporting victims and survivors of violence. And then also taking a look at what the best practice research is nationally to really inform the strongest kind of research supported recommendations. Before I go any further, I want to share this definition of violence so we're all on the same page. There's a lot of different definitions of violence, but I'm partial to this one, where violence is defined as delivering physical blows with or without weaponry, displaying and misusing one's power, or bombarding a person with destructive misinformation and myths so that in effect, an assault occurs on either a person's physical body or to the self-concept, identity, cognitions, affects, and consciousness of the victim of violence. And I especially like this definition because I think it accounts for the whole spectrum. Violence happens in subtle and discreet and invisible ways, and also in really overt ways that can be physical. So the way we organized the recommendations was by applying a public health, disease prevention, sort of levels of prevention, priority. Oops, sorry, I fumbled that. We divided into 3 different areas of prevention in the public health field. When dealing with injury and disease, there are 3 general categories of prevention, and they're all really important, I think, when it comes to violence because of the severity of the issue. But we started by looking at tertiary prevention. So tertiary describes those who are most affected. Secondary are those who are next affected. And then primary is really referring to the whole community and really strategies to prevent violence before it has even occurred. Just to highlight some of the national best practices that have emerged over the last 40 years or so of public health violence prevention research. Here is a sort of a top 10 list, if you will. Definitely it's recommended to establish infrastructure, to collect and analyze quality data, to select and carry out and evaluate evidence-based strategies, to support a community-based approach, to provide lots of training and assistance to community partners, to emphasize healing with trauma-informed approaches, to invest in an anti-violence workforce, to fund it, to engage in partnerships and coalitions, and to be committed to continuous quality improvement. So for the sake of this conversation today, I thought it would be helpful to highlight some of the responsibilities that the Community Health and Safety Task Force has been assigned, and to show you where the recommendations intersect with those responsibilities. You all have a copy of the report. The copy that was uploaded most recently online has the correct formatting. I think there was a glitch with the formatting from the prior copy. So there you can read, the comprehensive process that was taken to compile these recommendations, as well as all of the recommendations across the 3 levels of prevention. So I'm just pulling out the ones that seem to intersect with this task force's objectives. So the first one is consistent with that top best practice. It's really to establish sustainable infrastructure within the city and in partnership with the county. So the recommendation here is to create a violence prevention unit that would work cross-departmentally. It would also work in partnership with community-based organizations, and really play a role in dealing with violence comprehensively so that we can build our capacity to prevent and respond to violence effectively over time. The second recommendation that I think matches up with this responsibility is to do what we can to ensure that workforces that are particularly exposed to violence, so law enforcement, EMS, corrections, that they have the appropriate education and support needed to deal with violence effectively. So that would include education on trauma-informed practice, protocols to mitigate secondary trauma. So secondary trauma happens when we're exposed to trauma in our work. We might not be the one who was victimized, but we have witnessed it and it affects us. And then also that these workforces have systems to assess and respond to workers' mental well-being, to ensure not only that they can carry out their job in a quality manner, but that they're not at risk for any further harm to themselves or to others, because sometimes that can result from secondary trauma as well. Another recommendation here to highlight is to more broadly than those workforces that I just mentioned, really invest in community health and safety providers' knowledge in what leads to violence, how to recognize it, how to recognize a whole range of types of violence. There's so many hidden forms of violence. I know our police officers present are aware of, in particular, how difficult it can be to, really identify when something is definitely happening, when it's happening in a secretive way behind doors. Child sexual abuse, domestic violence, those tend to be human trafficking, more hidden forms of violence that are hard to detect. So this is a recommendation for education on how to identify those forms, how to assess for violence risk and victimization, and also to have a greater capacity for bystander intervention and de-escalation. Another task force responsibility is to assess SFPD's operations, policies, procedures, and practices. So I'm especially excited to learn from this task force what you may have already set in motion with regard to this responsibility, what we can learn from in terms of your assessment. The recommendation here, after many conversations with folks from the PD and community partners, is really to, first of all, provide support around workplace wellness to promote good mental health, again, to mitigate secondary trauma, also to facilitate relationship building and sustain communications between the PD and different health and safety providers. All too often, folks just don't know who the other folks are in the community or in the field. Also to promote mentorship and networking with other departments, maybe in other cities that are doing an especially great job. Also to review and contribute to the updating of policies and procedures on domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, and stalking. Again, those are all forms of violence that tend to be more hidden, and they require even more expertise and care in dealing with in a trauma-informed way, and to provide education on all of that. The next responsibility that intersects here is to assess ways that the PD can connect with the community to provide safety and offer services while engendering trust and mutual respect. So one of the recommendations that I think fits here is the one we came up around really reviving a coordinated community response council. There used to be one in place called Santa Fe Safe. It went quiet over the last couple of years. It had a lot of success in connecting folks and elevating awareness around domestic violence. So this is a recommendation to bring something like that back with a particular focus on establishing a multidisciplinary team, so that not only are there follow-up services for domestic violence victims, but we're also certain that the perpetrators are being held accountable and getting the right points of contact with the criminal justice and health services system. The next recommendation is to continue to fund and expand violence prevention practices and programs that are demonstrated to work. And I've highlighted, because this is really the one that pertains to the responsibility, just part A, to assess and mitigate violence risk. You may all be aware, as this issue has been gaining more and more attention lately, that one of the best ways to prevent mass shootings or school shootings is to really ensure that a solid collaboration is in place between your police department, your school district, mental health providers, to be able to identify those people who are demonstrating that they might that they might cause harm to others. The Part B is also an important recommendation, but it's not specific to the task force responsibility. Although I do want to note it because I know that there are folks here who are invested in restorative justice and trauma-informed practice. So I think this part of the recommendation intersects with the work of the various members of the task force. Another task force responsibility is to provide an opportunity for a broad cross-section of the community to advise on their experiences to help improve safety and health. And so this is a recommendation to basically create a multi-sector coalition type group that is for the purpose of building trust among the people who are present. So bringing together folks from across police, fire, emergency housing, victim advocacy, education, to build relationships, to exchange information, and to identify needs and assets and solutions collectively, and then to pursue collaborative action to promote community health and safety. I had the privilege of working with the Prevention Alliance for a period of time, and I think this is something that we did pretty well. People tended to get to know each other over time and initiate collaborations and partnerships through the information that they were sharing as a group. So this is sort of in the spirit of de-siloing our work. And then finally, I just want to highlight one of the task force's main interest areas, community engagement, and to point out a couple ways that the recommendations promote community engagement. One is the recommendation that we as a community create a family center where community members can come together and connect and access free services and resources. Another recommendation is to provide community forums after public acts of violence to facilitate healing so that folks can process the event and also access services that they may need and engage in violence prevention planning and advocacy if that's what they want. So, you know, thinking to another recent tragedy that we just had with Andres and Efren, I believe is his name. You know, it seems like now's an important time for the community to come together and do some processing and healing around that, so that we can deal with that trauma and move forward in a more healed way. Another recommendation, and I believe this is the last one for this presentation, is to really expand the education that's provided to all community members, the greatest number of community members. So, you know, this is targeted audience-specific education that is culturally relevant, and it should be designed to increase people's knowledge of different forms of violence. So just like we need folks who are working in the health and safety sectors to have a deeper understanding of these forms of violence, it's also really helpful if everyday people, all community members know this so that we're better prepared to intervene and we know more about what our options are to intervene and to do so safely. So now I just would like to open it up to questions and discussion, although I wonder if maybe we should actually do this in a reverse order. Julie, did you want to go over this slide?
Yeah, that'd be great. So,
Okay.
you know, just as our, you know, thank you so much, Sophie. It's been an absolute pleasure working with her on this.
Could you not get the closed caption?
No, sorry. It wouldn't. I have to go back into the system.
I have no idea what you're saying, but I'll catch up after.
She has to read lips.
Got it. So it's these points. The next steps. One is hiring a program manager to carry out the recommendations, which we're in the process of hiring. The second one is the use of ARPA allocation, which is about $1 million to fund violence prevention and intervention efforts. And then 3 is we're finalizing an MOA to formalize the partnership with Santa Fe County to address violence collaboratively and comprehensively. And then finally, we're going to be developing a 2-year strategic plan based on these recommendations. And so luckily, with the blessing of the mayor and city council, we've gotten almost all 3 of these done. And so our next step is going to be to really formalize the MOA and then do the 2-year strategic plan.
Just to repeat for Mary.
Yeah.
Mary
Louise.
Louise, I'm sorry, just to repeat, she just said that 3 of these steps, a lot of progress on. She basically just read what was on the slide here.
Got it.
Yeah. Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, so perhaps now we can open it up for questions and discussion. Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for bringing us back with that last one.
I'm just waiting do we see everybody? Okay. So first I want to thank Sophie
Thank
for
you.
your presentation and relating it. I'm thanking Sophie for relating this back to our work for the task force, because when you presented it, it was really just an overview of the research. And so making it very specific to the task force and recommendations, I think is really helpful. I like the way you made that connection. And so I think there will be questions. I just see Emily. Is everybody on the screen? Maybe we could open it up because I don't see everybody.
Yeah.
Emily has her hand up. I have a few questions after, but go ahead, and Emily.
Thanks so much. Hi, Sophie. Thanks for the presentation. I have a couple questions. And then I probably have a question for the group. So I'll start with the specific questions for Sophie. The assaults where we saw the increase, where they doubled in the last year, do we know, like, of those assaults, were they mostly domestic violence? Is there a way to sort of categorize, were they random? I'm just curious, as it relates to the type of interventions. That was my first question. My second question was around the unit you talked about and the multidisciplinary team. Would those live with this new program manager, or would those be envisioned as sort of external community-based organizations that would lead it? So that's my second question. Sorry, I'll end with my third question. Was, given that these recommendations are moving forward, I guess the question is, what is the ask for this task force? Is the request for us to consider these recommendations and also include them in the final report, since this work is already moving forward? I'm just curious, or are there additional recommendations that this group could make to enhance what's already occurring in the city? So thanks for the opportunity to ask those questions.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to repeat each question and correct me if I didn't quite capture it. Yes.
I read her lips.
You read her lips. Okay, great.
So be careful, I can read your lips.
As long as you can't read mine. So first of all, Chief Joy might have something to comment with regard to the assaults. I simply included the total number of assaults that were reported by SFPD and did not look at, the prevalences of the different forms of assault. So that's something that I think needs more of an investigation to take more time to look into. And I think that the Violence Prevention Unit could help play a role in that, maybe in partnership with the Department of Health as well, which is increasing its capacity to deal with violence. Because there's a need, it's my understanding across the board, for more support with data analysis. So I think we would want to get a better understanding from the PD's data analysis team, what their needs are in terms of analyzing those assaults. But it's a great question, and you're right. It would really give us more direction on how to tailor some of these interventions. The second question, I've already forgotten it. I'm sorry. What was it?
The second question was, you had recommended the unit.
Oh, yeah.
And then the multidisciplinary team, and where those, you'd imagine those living.
Yeah. At this point, I think it can go either way. I think it's based on what community providers are able to commit to. I think without having anything new housed in the unit, I think you could establish the multidisciplinary team based on the providers who are currently in place. And you could look to the child sexual assault multidisciplinary team as a model to replicate that on. So, such a team would include representatives from criminal justice, from victim advocacy, from law enforcement, and maybe other groups, depending on the case, that are relevant. But I think it could go either way. There's another recommendation in here around enhancing victim advocacy so that it becomes 24/7 and on call and multilingual. Unfortunately, there's no, on call victim advocacy service currently available for domestic violence to that degree. So, it's a similar fork in the road, that could either be something new that gets enhanced with a current community provider, or maybe it's something that the violence prevention unit takes on over time. And then the third question, I think, was for the group, right?
Yeah, or anyone who can answer it. I'm just curious. So it's awesome to have this presentation. We know this work is moving forward, but what is the ask for this group? What our role should be with these recommendations?
Or flip, like it could be both, like what's the ask for us, and also what is the ask for you all, because you did this, staff actually sanctioned this report. I mean, not sanctioned, but you contracted for this report with a goal in mind. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, Director Ochoa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of this committee. So actually, as Julie said, this was sort of in response to some increase in community violence, especially youth violence with guns that was happening. And really the mayor reached out, and at the same time, Julie, of course, was already thinking about things that we had underway and how to enhance them. So just, I think the quick answer to your question, Emily, is we wanted you to be informed of what we're doing. We're in the process of hiring our program manager, and we've been talking with the county and their youth services division, especially about what the scope of this unit's work should be. So let's just stay in conversation, because nothing is written in stone right now. So as you all are, formulating things that you want to see done, let's have continued conversations around it. We're just really excited that the council, gave us another program manager for this work. We now have in the Youth and Family Services Division, which started with Julie was the Youth and Family Services Division, and she was holding it up wonderfully. But now we have a Connect program manager, and I'll remind people that in Connect, navigators asked a question about interpersonal violence, which is another data point that we'd love to pull in, as well as our new violence prevention program manager and our homeless services program manager. So we're developing our capacity to just be responsive. And what's been great is that, in conversations that Sophie's had and that Julie's having with PD and fire, we're able to knit these things together a little more organically than we would have maybe in the past. So it's a bit of a rambling answer to your question, but I think we want to just keep you informed as things develop, so that if you have input, since you are a panel of experts in this field, we would love to hear from you on a regular basis.
Emily, did that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
If for some reason you all have a question and we don't see your hand, please just unmute and let us know.
I
And
have a question.
Marcela,
I'm muting myself.
so Marcela, just, so you know,
I know.
yeah, I know.
I'm
I'm
sorry, I
sorry.
can't walk. If everyone
You wanna
were
be in the
wearing
front?
masks, I would do it.
Yeah, I know.
I have my COVID-free
She's
person.
gonna
I'm
talk,
afraid
so you
of
can-
it.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I'm still a social distancer.
You have lips, I didn't know.
That smile.
So I really appreciate Emily asking that question because I was also wondering, but it sounds like Kira, there will be a new person who will deal with this, and then potentially we could add, based on the recommendations to the scope of work in the future. So that's good. Thank you for telling us that. That's great. But I have a question about, for Sophie, and it is, or anyone, Julie or Kira, that are involved in this. And there were pieces in there about one, sort of economic issues relating to violence. And I'm wondering, the city has embraced some GBI components, which I think is great. And there are pilot programs around the country that support people coursing through or getting out of detention centers, jails. And so I'm putting that out there as perhaps a way to think about preventing for people already perpetrating violence or experiencing it. And one of the things that Monica often reminds us on this committee is that people who are coursing through our criminal legal system as what we think of as offenders or perpetrators or people of concern in our community are often also victims. And there's not a clear, it's very hard often in our community to distinguish and to have that clear binary. And so I'm wondering if part of those recommendations, or if you could dig a little deeper into, for us, what people, young people coursing through the criminal legal system, people already arrested, people already, what can be done to help mitigate further violence or to do interventions with those folks?
Yes, thank you for such an important question. Yeah, the greatest predictor of both violent victimization and perpetration is having been victimized earlier on in life by violence. So you're right, they're often the same category. To answer your question, first of all, I think that piece around having a multi-sector community coalition that brings together folks who are working firsthand with those types of individuals that you're describing, legal, criminal legal system involved people. I think it would be important to have them at the table so that they're part of a conversation about what is needed, what the concerns are, what solutions might be. I think it's also important to include voice from people who have previously been incarcerated and might even currently be incarcerated. Maybe they are already engaged in a program such as Project Echo, peer support, where they are wanting to lend their voice to community solutions. So that's one part of the answer. The second part is I would suggest you take a look at the one of the priority recommendations that was not highlighted in the presentation is to invest in a cohort of youth who are at highest risk for violent victimization or perpetration, and to wrap services and mentorship and support around them over time to help them build their education of violence and how to prevent it, to learn from them how to prevent it and what's going on. And to cultivate a violence prevention or violence intervention workforce over time. So this is in the spirit of the national best practice, whereby peer influencers are employed to go out into the community and be present in situations when violence is most likely to recur. So Cure Violence is the evidence-based program that has shown to reduce shootings and fatalities caused by intergroup conflict. Sometimes it's gang violence, sometimes it's just groups that are at odds with each other. And so the process is that these trusted community members who know their communities intimately, who have credibility, often are formerly incarcerated, they are talking these younger folks out of retaliating. So as an example, if we had a model like this in effect in Santa Fe, you might have some of these trusted peer influencers be present at the funeral ceremonies this Friday for Andres, and have an ear open to when there might be murmurings of retaliation, and to dissuade those people from retaliating. So over time, the process is to replace the pro-violent norms with pro-social ones, so that instead of coping with stress with violence, these individuals are turning to their friends or to their mentors to help deal with what they're dealing with emotionally. And the other part is to help build a violence prevention workforce over time. When you read the report, you'll see that a lot of people mentioned that economic stress is one of the factors that is influencing violent behavior. And when you look at young people, a lot of young people are going to kind of a gun involved or drug involved lifestyle, because that seems like a more lucrative way to get by. So we want to change that over time with building up the workforce. But there's also recommendations to invest in local leadership and enhance workforces across disciplines, not just public safety. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Marcella. Anyone else on Zoom have any questions, follow-up questions? I see Gino kind of waving his hand.
Yeah, but by the way, incredible presentation and very hopeful in that we're seeing that the city's getting it. You're developing this. You have a plan moving forward. I think my biggest question is, as you're designing the programs, the BPU, all of that, and the outreach, my question is, how are we as a city planning the staffing and the build out of staffing? Because these are a lot of important objectives, but it feels to me you're going to need pretty substantial staffing to have a broad reach in the community.
Absolutely agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why one of the top national pieces of guidance on violence prevention is to build up the infrastructure, build up the anti-violence workforce. Mm-hmm. So Santa Fe is very lucky that there's this $1 million budget available. That gives me a lot of hope as well, because I see a lot of potential to hire or to contract with all kinds of talented local leaders who can help to carry out some of this work. So my suggestion would be to begin to transform this set of recommendations into an actionable strategic plan. And that plan would specify exactly how to operationalize it through budget and personnel over time.
And then just to add, there's a lot of interest on this on the state level, and a lot of funding is opening up on the state level to be able to support this kind of work, not only in planning, but also in implementation and building out capacity. So we've been having a lot of meetings, the team, our internal team, to discuss going after some of that state funds to support this work ongoing. So.
Okay, thank you. It's a work in process, and it's hard to put numbers on it, I understand, but to me, it looks like it's going to be very intensive, necessarily going to be very staff intensive.
Especially when we give you all that extra based on these recommendations.
Bring it on.
Let's see what else we can.
Gina, did you have other questions?
No, thank you. That was really it. That's my biggest observation and question.
Thank you.
Can I comment on just one thing with regard to that? I think there's a lot of opportunities to leverage existing programs that are well aligned. So for example, we have a number of great prevention programs in the schools. Let me give the example of teen parent programming. There's an opportunity to integrate more education into existing times when parents come together and get other kinds of education. So if they're coming together and they're learning about positive parenting skills, they can also at the same time learn about, how to protect their child against child sexual abuse. So I think it's not just a matter of creating new roles or new contracts. It's really looking at what are the assets that we can share? How can we leverage them? How can we pool resources? And I think, again, that multi-sector coalition can help play a role in driving the strategic direction for that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, with regard, it goes along with, I think what Gina was saying is, there seems to be money at the state level, and typically, I think the state likes to look at more regional models. So the MOU with the county, are we looking at making this a regional program with regards to violence prevention unit and the multidisciplinary team, working with them for one team that would respond across borders or throughout the entire county? I guess the schools could be included in that as well. And I think the state would be a little more receptive to giving money if it were a regional model than just the city or just the county.
Well, fortunately, we just found out from the Department of Health that prospective grantees will be counties or municipal entities. So the city or the county, if it's deemed that they are a high needs enough entity, they could be eligible. But I like your point about the regional process, because I think we all recognize that borders are kind of arbitrary among our different counties and people are transient. So I think having partnerships across counties and throughout the region and across the state would be important. Did you want to add anything to that?
We've been in discussions with the county because the county is also really interested in this work. And I think it's a great suggestion to think about this work regionally across not only city, but also through the county. And so, it's something that we're willing to explore and want to explore as we further develop this work.
But the state's actually encouraging to remain in your silo to either county or city, but not really looking at regional.
In the conversations we have with DOH, yeah. So we're negotiating with the county on, even with this new funding coming in from the state, how it's going to be administered and how we can, support each other in the grant making or the grant application process, and in building, a regional team in response to incidents of violence.
Yeah, thanks. And then with the idea of the family center, you brought up a local issue that just happened recently. Is that how the family centers are designed and set up, or are they designed and set up that if you have something like a school shooting that happens in another part of the country, that family center could be activated to talk about school shootings in general?
I think the sky is the limit. There are no current plans for the family center, but I think we can invite input from the community itself. We can ask families, what would you want? If you had a place that you wanted to go to, where you would feel safe, where you could get the help that you need, where you could have your children looked after or get a warm meal or be connected to a mentor, what are all the assets and resources that you would want to have there? And then really create a process so that it's somehow really community run, so that, let's say a group that uses the space, maybe it's a group of families in a neighborhood where a shooting happened. Maybe they decide, hey, we're going to host a community forum here. we're going to come up with some solutions around this problem. So I think the family center could be a place where some of these activities take place. But none of that has really been determined. I think it would be really exciting to hear from families. That recommendation came specifically from, someone with a big family who, personally feels, and also as a representative of families like her own, like that would be a really helpful resource. So yeah, it hasn't been figured out yet.
Well, yeah, the recent school shooting in Uvalde, and, I get questions frequently, are we prepared if something happened here? So I think the community, when something like that happens, is they become really concerned and wondering if that happened here, how are we prepared to respond?
Yeah.
And I know we are, but I'm a lay person now, so it's hard to explain and describe how well prepared we are.
Yeah, that kind of collective processing, when you bring community members together who've been exposed to a disaster or some kind of trauma, it really helps people to cope with what's taken place. It's like a first step so that, it might prevent any kind of critical incident trauma from occurring, which is when you have even just short-term trauma after an incident. It might play a role in preventing PTSD, which happens after a long period of time. But yeah, I think that's really important to follow that best practice in mitigating community trauma by bringing people together for an opportunity to talk about it and actually acknowledge what took place after it's happened.
On that note, are you aware, does the state still have what they used to call CERT teams, or critical incident response teams, made up of social workers and counselors, I think?
I don't know. Someone else know?
I don't know, but I have a question. Do you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I actually have not a question, but I want to give you a shout out, because when we lost a student on the south side, we brought kids together to do a mural project, and you came in regular clothes and acknowledged those kids like they were human beings, and you didn't come in your uniform, which allowed them to know that you were a dad, a community member, a husband, and not a police officer, which I think that maybe we can recognize that those efforts coming from police department are huge. Coming as a human being before you show a badge, right? And so that was a community event that we brought together that allowed several students and their parents to come to a safe space and have some healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that our native New Mexican culture is all about being inclusive. And we just need to start building those bridges with people that wear a uniform, and those community members and the social workers and everybody else that can really invest in our families. Second, I just want to give you a shout out. You're always so articulate, and you don't only just do the work and research, but you speak from your heart, and it goes a long way.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. It makes me feel less self-conscious about when I stutter. So I appreciate it.
I stutter all the time, but the last thing I want to say is that I'm really appreciative of the city of Santa Fe for investing in a restorative justice elementary coordinator who has been able to do so much work. And I'm sure if you guys saw the report of how many students that we got to serve, it was huge. And it was because you invested in an elementary restorative justice person. So thank you for that. That was the last thing I had to say.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Annie?
Oh, thanks, Annie. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. It's nice to see everyone. And Sophie, what a great presentation. I think your research and recommendations are going to really influence our recommendations as well. And I especially appreciate your trauma-informed care perspective, both the PTSD that our first responders experience, but also what leads to justice involvement and the trauma that our community is experiencing and why they get police involved And in my work life, working with foster children, we see a huge percentage of them are institutionalized and juvenile justice involved. And we just released a video a few weeks ago from young leaders of color who were all duly involved, who were all juvenile justice involved. And they called it the foster care to prison pipeline. And they really wanted first responders to understand they were criminalized for their trauma behaviors, for their trauma responses. So I'm curious from your perspective, Sophie, how do we educate our educators and first responders on what those trauma symptoms are and how to respond to them so they don't get criminalized for that?
That's such an important question. Thank you. And it's such a huge question. I think it's a lot bigger than I have the ability to answer. I think it's a process that would take time and partnership and many conversations between, our different law enforcement providers or different providers in the criminal legal sphere. Because there is some good education in place. There are some innovations in the training that is taking place. Also, there are people in these workforces who have their own expertise as people who've survived trauma. So I think a starting point is really to sort of gauge, okay, what is being offered already? What is really needed? And also to hear from young people or other people who are coming from that experience of being criminalized or victimized for their trauma, hearing from them firsthand and ensuring that they're part of the process. Being involved in the foster care system is also a risk factor for entering human trafficking or commercial exploitation, which often gets criminalized as well. So yeah, hearing from survivors and from the people who advocate for them every day in their jobs, I think that can be really helpful. And it can also be helpful to take the time to, really slow down and look deeply at one's practice, incident by incident, how did we do when it came to responding in a trauma-informed way? How can we get more community input on that? And I think that's a big part of this task force's work. So maybe this task force will come up with some more answers to that question over time, or maybe you already have some.
Thank you, Annie. In the interest of time, I will probably ask my questions later, but I do want to know, since all of you are here, and this report was actually directed by your department and all of the officers and folks that have listened to this presentation or read the report, if there was something that stood out to you that you thought, yes, we're already doing, or we could actually do better about that. And I'm thinking internally, like you all getting the support you need for the things that you experience in the community. And then likewise, like these different models, the violence prevention unit or having a multi-sector coalition, and then the family center, those were just a few that were listed. If those are things that would help you to do your job better, or I don't know, I'm just trying to think like from this report, the priorities that kind of surface for all of you, and I'm not just looking at the director, but all of you that heard the presentation and read it. So
I have one thing that's interesting. Great presentation. You're very articulate.
thank you.
So very good.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Matt Champlin. I'm a deputy chief of operations for the team. So I think it's interesting. We've looked over the years for like, we'll say drug abuse. We looked at it when I started. I'm sure when the chief started, when he started. It's definitely when he started 30 years ago. Got like 32 years in law enforcement. We looked at it as criminal. Everything was criminal. Marijuana, pipes, etc. Criminal. As it's transitioned, I was one of the first detectives of the property crimes unit with DC Valdez over there when we first began weed. And we were all like, what is this? And why are we doing this? How are they not criminals? They're burglars. And it took a transition of mental, a process there to say, okay, this is why this is happening. This is because of substance abuse, and this is not working what we're doing. And then you look at even more recently in the last 5 to 6, even maybe 7 years, but 5 to 6 really, where we looked at mental illness completely differently in law enforcement, where we're saying, okay, there's a problem here, a bigger problem, and it's not just running in there guns ablazing, so to speak. Where there's maybe we can attack this a different way, and we're doing it like the alternative response unit and doing different things. Well, now it's violence. You know, this is another one of the things that I think is interesting, because now we're on another major topic that we can maybe prevent something in a different way. And I think that whatever that training may be that comes, or how we see this, not necessarily decriminalizing the act of hurting somebody, but maybe preventing it before it happens. That's the one that stood out to me. It's very interesting. It makes me think of Bleed and how we handle mental illness, how we have transitioned over the years, so to speak. So.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So I so appreciate that point, and you making that parallel with substance use disorder and that paradigm shift in recognizing that addiction is a disease. And this is just like the movement to end violence that's been happening nationally. Starting with, you know, when violence was first framed as a public health problem in the maybe late 70s, I think. It's taken time, but you know, it's at the point now where most states and many counties have injury and violence prevention divisions within their public health departments. And New Mexico has been lagging behind in that way. Good news, it's changing. They're now inserting the word violence into their injury prevention division. But absolutely, when we recognize that violence is a health problem, and it's specifically a behavioral health problem, just like mental illnesses, just like substance use disorder is, then we realize, oh, wow, we can actually prevent it. You know, there is so much research that shows how you can effectively prevent violence, not all forms of violence necessarily, but enough where we could be doing a lot better. So I think your way of thinking about it is just spot on, and helping people to make that change from seeing violence as a moral failure, which it often feels like because it causes a lot of pain and damage and destruction. But, you know, embracing violence as something that is not senseless, it is predictable, and we can help to heal it and change it over time.
I'd like to add to that, you know, as you I think know, the San Francisco Department does very good crisis intervention treatment. Built back into all training, critical incident debriefs. And I'm sure we can do more to support officers in the field. Lives out there. I just think
Kira got to speak.
Kira, we can't.
Nobody ever told me that before. Sorry about that, guys. So I was just saying that SFPD has, you know, crisis intervention training embedded into all of our training, into critical incident debriefs and support. We can always do more of that and understand the connection. And this is a little folksy, but I just feel like our department and the people in it, you alluded to this, for various reasons and from their own experiences in lives to things they've seen on the job, you know, they are peace officers. They're peace officers. They're there to bring peace to a situation. And so we have a high level of professionalism in our department around how to interact with people who are being violent and coming out of crisis and trauma. And I can't say that we get it right every single time out there, but I'm personally extremely proud of this department and the way that I hear back from community members around how our officers de-escalated situations, how our officers were incredibly professional and compassionate. And so I think we have a lot to build on in that regard. And in fact, I think our officers can inform other parts of our community on how to do that. You know, if I had to do that in a situation where somebody was coming at me, I would not do well, you know? So I think that we can learn, you know, in their free time, they can train all of us for that.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know if you want to add anything to that too.
Yeah, sure. I'm Paul Joy, Chief of Police. You guys can see me in the corner, okay? There I am. So yeah, there's a lot there, and I've been fortunate to work with and around Sophie for a while now. We met several years ago with the Municipal Drug Strategies Task Force in this room, actually. And yeah, what I keep going back to and go around, and I'll reference a little bit in our discussion with our presentation as well, is we try to do well and always trying to improve, of course, by reaching out to people that are experts in their respective field that are not ours. And something that I am such a fan of with ARU is the understanding and acceptance of the variety of calls, the call types and call volume that is tasked for law enforcement that police respond to that aren't police issues. And we've taken those on because there was no one else to take those on. And so many of those calls have that element and component of behavioral mental health that police aren't the best and most suitable folks to be responding to that. But again, we didn't ask for those, we inherited those. And so a lot of it has been on our end, trying to get our personnel is trained and varied and multifaceted for any different type of call. And I can go on and on about how a call comes in and what it actually is when we get there, and how our officers are mentally preparing for one thing and they show up and it's something completely different, and they have to shift mindsets on a dime and go from responding to what is potentially, or we get called in as a violent encounter or break and entering or a burglary in progress, and they show up on scene and it's someone in crisis who is having a completely different issue that again our guys are having to shift mindsets and work with and come to hopefully a peaceful resolution in real time. What we've done well, that started with Chief Padilla, and we continue on and expanded the contract, was for the public safety psychology group with Dr. Troy Rogers, which allows for our officers to get counseling and meet with those qualified, specialized folks that they don't have to go through me for it. They don't have to go through the DCs for it. If we don't know who's going and who's doing what, we get the bill on the back end, and that's open to all of our personnel. And we know it's getting used because we've had to expand the contract. So that's been good. And when we've had our critical incident debriefs, it's our peer officer support team and also the folks from PSPG to help and work through and chat with these folks.
PSPG.
Public Safety Psychology Group.
Got it.
Yeah, the same group, sorry.
And they're the group that the fire department also now contracts with, so to provide support. And I learned recently from the chief that community members can also come to the critical incident debriefs if they've been affected in some cases. So there's a lot to build on in terms of how to grow some of these recommendations. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just making
I'm done,
sure.
you're done.
No, thank you, Chief. Thank you. Yeah, I think we could continue talking about this topic. There's a lot of good information in there. I think that we can extract some aspects of it in our own recommendations that are pertinent to what we've been looking at. So I think, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the generous reception. And I just want to really broaden those thanks out to every single person that I spoke to, many people in this room, you at the police department, Chief Joy were so helpful in providing feedback and input on an ongoing way. Julie, Kira, for your leadership with this project. So thank you very, very much. And yeah, I hope you hear the voices of the people that I spoke to. I'm just trying to be a conduit here. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the next presentation. And I'm wondering if you all could do the presentation in 10, 15 minutes, just so we could get some questions in, and we have kind of like other, administrative stuff. But this next presentation is this Santa Fe Police Department workload assessment staffing study that was done by Matrix Consulting. And they're not here, but it's Is DC Valdez gonna lead this or who's
I
gonna?
was gonna open up is someone doing the screen share or do we just
I
speak
think.
through real quick?
Do you have
I'll
their
do this
presentation?
pretty high level.
Mhm.
Just a quick general overview of what we did, what they came up with, and just kind of what we've been working with and doing. And then my DCs and captains can maybe interrupt if I'm going in the wrong direction or speaking out of school.
I think we're not gonna be able to get, unless you have it.
Oh, the
in
presentation?
Yeah,
We don't, as long as everyone can see it or has it, or has had the opportunity to check it out, I can just speak to it real quick. So
In the chat, you put a link in the chat, they'll be able to open it up.
yeah, I was just thinking like, because it's being recorded and people that might see this later won't know what you're talking about necessarily.
Put a link in the chat and people can open it.
Councilman, do you want me to start now?
Yeah, let's do that and then we'll let.
I'll start chatting and we'll pick up here. So in the late summer of 2021, we contracted with Matrix Consulting Group to do a workload assessment. And so there are a number of ways to determine best staffing for a city and community for a police department. One that we've heard oftentimes over the years is, well, a police department, there should be X number of officers per X number of people, right? X thousands of people, like one officer for every thousand. Let's do that out there. And that is a way of doing it, but it's not the best way of doing it because each community is and should be unique. Each department should be unique to the community that it serves. And so we reached out to this company to do not just population, not just officers per population, but staffing based on calls for service, call type, call volume, and what the department does for the community that it serves. What we learned was that, again, doing a quick overview, is that Santa Fe, our department for our population, we are above average with the services that we offer and the call volume that we handle per other agencies and other communities our size. They came back with several recommendations. The goal for the focus, of course, is patrol. Patrol is our backbone for the department. Patrol is the first responders for any issues that you deal with. When you call 911, generally speaking, it's patrol that responds to your needs. Also to be that proactive and do the community policing, proactive policing, offer that criminal deterrent and the police presence. The goal, nationally speaking, is to have a 40% of proactive time cumulatively around the clock. And so what the company came back with was, by their assessment, currently we were operating about 33% of proactive time. And so trying to figure out how can we increase that proactivity time. Obviously, of course, that includes the need to increase the number of officers that we have. They did an assessment of proactive time around the clock and what time periods we were able to be more proactive versus what time periods we were having to be more just responding to calls for service. And then again, making recommendations based on their assessment. A number of recommendations that they came out with. We are fortunate, this isn't just us patting ourselves on the back. This is something that when I took over as interim chief in December, named permanent in March, basically from December and on, our staff, myself, the DCs, the captains, we wanted to have real honest conversations with our staff and amongst each other about what are we doing well and where can we make improvements and how do we make those improvements, especially with doing so with the tools that we have already and the resources that we have in front of us. So beginning in April, we made immediate adjustments to staffing and special operations training, all these things done to, again, maximize the staffing available that we have right now to the streets right now. One of the recommendations that Matrix came up with was the last several years, more than a decade, we've had one common day, which has been Friday, for all patrol shifts. Each shift, we have 3 shifts, days, swings, graves. Trying to talk quickly to get our time in here. So if I'm going too fast or I'm rambling, slow me down, cut me off. I don't mind. So we have 3 shifts, days, swing, grave. Each shift has 4 teams per shift. Now, historically, all 4 teams, their common day was Friday. So the teams either worked Tuesday through Friday or they worked Friday through Monday. But all 4 teams for each shift was Friday. Now, on the flip side of that also, all of our special operations units also trained on Friday. So we have this on paper, in theory, this one day where we have all of our staffing. That's great. But no, we don't, because all of our special operations units, our SWAT team, ERT, EOD, bomb team, they're all also doing their trainings, which also eats into that common day staffing. So one of the things that was done that DC Champlin put into place was, okay, we're going to move from a 1-day common day schedule to a 2-day common day schedule. And we're going to switch the days that special operations conducts their training. And so far it's worked out pretty well. And that turns out that was one of the recommendations that Matrix came up with. So that was great. Another one of the recommendations that came up was changes in how the cases from investigations are disseminated and managed through casework and track. Well, it just so happened that Captain Ortiz, he went to Northwestern Staffing Command earlier in 2021, and his staffing study, when you go through Northwestern Staffing Command, you have to do a staffing study. So it's a research paper basically. And his staffing study was on case assignment and management and how to make that universal and make those improvements so that the cases that are being tracked and assigned at the investigations level are done basically the best that they can be. So that was an improvement that Captain Ortiz and his staff had already been working on and putting into place. Gonna bounce around a little bit. You know what? Isabel does missing something. Trying to run through it here. The recruitment, I'm sorry to put him on the spot here, but training, recruiting, that's his wheelhouse. One of the things that was done, this council passed a very great and comprehensive contract. This is probably the best recruiting tool that we've had in a very long time, this current contract, to make us competitive and even exceeding our partner agencies, especially in the region. Unfortunately, in this profession, a lot of us are all playing tug of war with the same personnel and the same resources, and we're kind of stealing from each other. And so on top of making the improvements that we can make internally for our own agency, also what are we doing and what can we do to make ourselves more appealing to those that are in the profession that would be beneficial to us as the department. And so that's something that Valdez has been working on and And his staff have been working diligently on to increase our numbers from the outside.
I'm DC Valdez, I'm over administration. So to speak more to the recruiting side, the council and various members have been with us since 2018, have done a tremendous job on making us more competitive. I shared with the council in 2019 and 2020 that the alarms are going off back in 2015 and 16 with Chief Gallagher, where he said, we're going to be suffering a loss of officers if we don't remain competitive. And unfortunately, we were unable to be competitive, and we saw a huge loss in 2019 with over 10 officers that left to other agencies as lateral officers, which was a huge blow to our agency. So we've been trying to go and fill those gaps, but also the impact of the George Floyd incident in 2020 has had a profound impact on law enforcement retention and recruitment. Those that are eligible to retire are leaving the profession. Those that don't have the family support or the support at work, or even from their colleagues, so they don't feel supported, are leaving the profession left and right. So that's why we're competing for other agencies where we have officers that want to continue doing good work, that are the good apples, not those that don't even work in the profession. We're trying to find those assets. And I've shared this with leadership time and time again. Yes, we have over 30 vacancies. We could have them all filled today if we wanted to. But when we look at candidates, we only want the best candidates that are going to fit the needs of our department and our community. We don't want to bring in any bad apples. That's one thing that we do. If it means we have to run short, we're going to run short. But those that we have within our organization are the best candidates out there that provided those great services. And that's the testament to their work. It's been shared with us through our leadership, when people have said, hey, this officer went by and here's what they did. And I was really impressed on the way that they handled the situation. The amount of training that we go into, we far exceed through our training program with crisis intervention training, the minimum training for dealing with individuals with mental impairments that's required by the state of New Mexico. Those are things that we see because our agencies have always been trailblazers. That's why when you see other agencies, when they come under a consent decree, they're under that consent decree because they thought they were the biggest agency on the block. If you don't tell us how to do our business. Santa Fe's never had that luxury. For us, we've been flexible to what we need to adapt to. We've adapted to the needs of our community. And even in times, there's individuals when we go to trainings across the state where they say, oh, in Santa Fe, they handle things a bit differently. But the way we see it is we take protect and serve seriously. We take that public trust that is instilled in us when we show our badge seriously, because the badge is not a symbol of authority, or it's not a symbol of I'm better than you. It's a symbol of public trust. And that's that trust that the community bestows upon us to make sure that we do the good work that they ask us to do. And that's something we do when we take our oath, is we say we're going to uphold the laws of the Constitution and protect everybody in our community. It doesn't matter if you're born and raised, you moved to Santa Fe and you now call it your home, or you came to visit Falmouth and you're here with us today. That's what we believe in, and that's what should be a part of law enforcement. So for our recruiting, that's what we look for. When we do our interviews with candidates, those are traits that we look for, and we make sure we let them know what our values are, what our expectations are, and it's going to be a challenge. It really is. It's not going to be a walk in the park. For us, we're here to serve and protect our community. But through that service means, like DC Chaplain said, if it's someone that is suffering from substance abuse, we're not criminalizing them. We're letting them know, hey, here's what happened. How can we prevent this from happening in the future? Can we streamline the process like we did through the LEAD program, or even through drug court, to say, let's try to go and minimize the trauma that happens by incarcerating someone, and let's get them in line with services on the front end of that, instead of incarcerating them, and then they're victimized in that system, then they come out, and then they miss a court date, and they're arrested again. And that cycle just happens perpetually until they're ready to get back into services. Instead of addressing at the front end and saying, if we gave you services right now, would you be interested? Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. But if they're ready to go, that's where our community partners come into play. And we really, really rely on them to do that. But with our police officer program, we've done an excellent job on making sure that we're so competitive. In the report, it also noted some other areas we need to improve on. So we had to do some improvements for our evidence process to make sure we gain that trust back after the incident happened, when we found out, hey, there were not best practices in place, and here's the impact of that, where you had victims that did not receive justice because something happened with a flawed process. And we don't want that to ever come back and have someone go through that again. The other side of it is make sure we have the staff that we need that is properly trained to run a good evidence process. So that's covered. We can't just say, hey, we have officers, let's just have everyone do it. They have a lot of things on their plate right now. That's what makes it difficult. We would love to have mental health professionals in our organization that are both police officers and mental health professionals. But it's really difficult for us with our call volume, with the amount of items they need to do day to day to maintain both licensures. It's really, really difficult. That's why we rely on partners and those partnerships that we have, much like Sophie mentioned, hey, what assets do we have? For us, we're always looking, what assets do we have? That's important to us because we understand we cannot solve all of our city's challenges. We rely on other stakeholders to make those things happen. Right now, what we're dealing with, and we've been dealing with for a while, is our chronic vacancy for our administrative staff. They try to fix the challenge with the increase to the living wage for city employees to $15 an hour. Unfortunately, had a unintended consequence where it then caused compaction between some of our records technicians and our admin staff, where now they start at the same pay. There's no delineation where we set it up in our structure where records tech is if you come in and you have a bit of experience, admin assistants where you have more experience. Those positions have been chronically vacant. We've interviewed over 75 applicants. Of those 75, we've had 3 accept job positions. Of those 3, 1 has left voluntarily, 1 was released, 1 still remains with us. They're in our record section. So that's a huge item that we still need to address. And not just looking at that, we just need police officers, because in order for police officers to operate, we need those staff members, but we need that support staff to make sure that records is being covered, their evidence is being supported, that we have crime scene technicians to support them. We're also looking at even diversifying some of the positions are on like our public safety aid program. Can they handle calls that do not require a police officer, or they're low-level calls that do not need a police officer there to deal with those types of situations? And also implementing a desk officer assignment where maybe someone doesn't want the police going to their house to place a business. Come over to our place of business. We'll have an officer there to take the call, or we'll take the call over the phone if you want to. So we make sure we're accessible to everyone out there in the public to the extent possible. There is a lot of growth that we still have. So for us, these recommendations are going to be helpful. It's a lot of stuff that we already knew and we already had at the foresight of saying we need to make improvements on this. But as we add other services and assets to our organization, we have to make sure that we account for the growth that will need for us to make that happen. So again, our current assets outside of our organization, we rely on tremendously. I know Julie and I have discussed, hey, how can we partner with someone, get people into, not only law enforcement, but public safety and, our community employment with the city in any position that we have, whether it be like in our community services section or with, even our parks and rec. And I think the partnerships that we do have with this parks as well, even today we had our, an HR analyst asked us, hey, utilities is having a job fair, can you help us out with the information? And we get that information out there because again, for us, we serve everybody. And when something happens with utilities, again, we can't put on the hard hat, get a bucket truck and take care of business. We rely on our assets to get that stuff done. So we're always trying to help people out when we do that. But the big thing that we have seen from the community, and unfortunately, it took almost, it was a tragedy for it to happen. For officers, when they go to a call for service, it's not because Ben's having a great day, come on over for a birthday cake. It's not because, hey, guess what? I just won lottery and let's go get something to eat. It's someone's in crisis. Their life is in shambles. Something happened to them. They're a victim of something, or one of their kids, something happened to them. So it's not their best day. And that's what our officers see. They don't get those calls like the chief and the DC and the captains that I get like, hey, thank you guys for what you do. We appreciate it. Keep the great work. We convey that message to them, but some people, they are asked, hey, look, thanks for saying that, but let me get you in touch with the officer too. And let me have them hear it from me as well. Or let's try to make that happen. So they can see that because again, the calls they're seeing, just like Sophie mentioned, that trauma. They see nothing but negativity. They see a car crash or someone passed. They see someone who was abused. And they're hoping that the process in the system will make things better for them. And that's what they see. 10 hours a day. That's what they get to see. So when we talk about community policing, it's not just a program where we pass out stickers, we go meet with people. It's building that trusted relationship with the community. It's letting people know through the way that we do our work that we care, we're here to help. And if we don't have the solution to the problem, then we're going to find someone that does. And we have our assets that can help us with that. So it's a huge collective program that we look at. But one thing that we make sure our staff knows, and I know DC Chaplain's let his staff know time and time again, they're working their tails off. Those horses have been whipped and they're still going full speed ahead. Eventually they're going to hit the wall. We need to let them know there's a reason why you do what you do. So he lets them know, hey, you do a fantastic job. Today he shared a case that his officers did where they applied a tourniquet to another lady who was wounded by gunfire. And the work that they did to save her life. Absent that, it would have been, I'm sorry, Captain Martinez did that. But recognizing what they do, because oftentimes for us, it's like, hey, you did a great job, fantastic, that's great. If you need anything, let us know. And then we recognize them either internally, but to let the community know, here's what your officers do. Unless you read the paper and see a blurb, you get just a small sliver of that story. So for us to recognize our staff, let them know, here's a great thing that you did, you made a difference. And that's what we ask people, and the chief knows, I want to look for people that want to make a difference, a positive difference for our community. And to make that happen, I think the first thing is show they're appreciated. And for us and for our leadership, you guys have shown they're appreciated. We're giving them pay that is amazing. We have some retired officers from 20 years ago, like, I've never made that, and I was at this rank. This is amazing, you know, where it's being recognized as a profession. But for us, again, it's a team effort. We don't just have police officers, we have admin staff, we have crime scene technicians, we have evidence technicians, we have a slew of people that contribute to the mission that we do. And again, it's a team effort. And it's great because it's not only a team for us, but as a city, we collaborate together to make that happen. The fire department with ARU, they really show that, hey, like we're sibling agencies. And sometimes, yeah, it's just like siblings, we may have a different perspective on things, but we get along, right? We get along, and you gang up on both of us. It's like, hey, well, we're going to band together and say, all right, cool, how can we address this challenge? And we're going to work together to get it done. But on these recommendations, a lot of things that they provided to us, they're already in motion. We're looking at those. There's some that we have that we're like trying to find a way to get it put together. One thing that we did appreciate was trying to account for the turnover between either departures, retirements, and onboarding. So for us, if we're just recruiting for the number that we're allocated, we have no wiggle room. So once those seats are filled, we're not able to recruit or onboard additional people. So that's always challenging. So for us, once we're able to get these vacancies to a position where we're down to 5 or 10, we want to see if we can implement that recommendation and say, hey, why don't you budget for about 5 to 6 officers above that? So if you have someone that retires or gets onboarded, because the time from hire to when they hit the street for cadet is about a year. But if someone retires from that time, we're going to be running short on patrol or in investigations. So having that built in is going to be really helpful for us to look at that. When we put on the scope work in this, so we wanted a quantitative assessment, not just something like, well, you can do this, do that. How many numbers do we need? And they really looked at the numbers and growth, like with economic development, what kind of businesses and homes are going to be developed in Santa Fe in the next 5 years? You know, where's the growth in the city, and where we're going to look to deploy these assets. But as we add those additional assets and those additional staff members, we just need that whole support system there to make sure that that goes. And I know Director Cho's doing a tremendous job with getting our people out to the community. Their car is their office. They could do a lot of things from their car. Make sure that they have the equipment that they need. Right now, we're about this close to being almost out of dangerous waters with our fleet. We're just waiting for the vehicles to come in, but making sure those items are there goes a long way for both recruiting and retention. Because people, they look at it, it's just like someone in an office setting. If you go to a building and the office is clean, it's looking good, it's well organized, you say, hey, it looks like it's a good place to work. You look at what the organizational behavior is there. Hey, everyone's real positive. Hey, this is a great place to work. Versus going to a place where it's just chaos. They're like, oh, sorry, folks, but typewriters down. We didn't have any money to buy any computers. Or, hey, they shut off our light bill because we didn't get the bill paid in time. If it's chaos and it's not very attractive, and again, the staff that are like, if you're looking for a place to get some experience, yeah, this might be okay, but you should be looking elsewhere. Our best recruits are our staff. So the more we take care of them, whether it's with support, equipment, training, or just let them know if you have this resource to go get mental health. And the big thing with mental health too is making sure that we let them know it's okay to feel pain. It's okay to feel upset about something. It's okay to go get help, because that was not something that existed. I know when I started with the department, and it wasn't something I know with Mr. Finger 30 years ago. It's like, suck it up and get to the next call. And the byproduct of that was you had first responders, not just police, but fire as well. They get in substance abuse. They die from alcoholism, and they wouldn't live out the years of retirement. They die at 45 to 50 years old. And that's something that we're looking to prevent with our staff. We don't want them to turn to even suicide based on the things that they saw, because they just bottled it all up. So for us, with the things that we saw, and even like Sophie, I didn't get to say earlier, but the recommendations when we talk about wellness and mental health for our staff, that's huge. That's huge. If you see what my front desk staff goes through some days, again, people don't come and say, thank you very much. I'm in crisis. I need help. Okay, let me get an officer. I want them here now. And they're taking the brunt of that verbal abuse until they can kind of get to a point where they build a rapport. and the rapport they build in such a quick amount of time is amazing. Same thing for officers when they get there.
I
It's
hate to
amazing.
stop you,
Yeah.
because you're on a good roll there, but we need to leave room for questions.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
About
Thank you.
10 minutes.
Thank you.
I have a
Trustee
question.
Valdez. Yeah, thank you, Marcela.
So I'm gonna do this for you. Thank you. Yeah, that is. So just a quick question on the methodology of this. And this is a question because we're bringing in folks for a panel from different RJ programs, diversionary programs, pre-filing, pre-booking diversionary programs. And I'm wondering, the calls for service are people who call, and that takes X amount of time, right? And it's projected to go up. I forget by what percent in the next 10 years. I just saw it on the PowerPoint. And so I'm wondering if there's an estimate for the time that is spent post-arrest. I have no sense of how much time an officer spends with individuals, particularly youth or anyone, post-arrest. Does that question make sense?
Yes.
Okay, and I just don't know, and I don't know how it plays into the recommendations that the matrix made.
So right now, if an arrest is made, just to transport someone to the adult detention center and to get them booked, that's anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, just to take them. If you add in the paperwork, that's anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on the complexity of the case. We're looking at 3 hours that someone is there post-arrest, not including the investigation before they get to that arrest decision. I know we do a lot of arrest diversion, but again, I think we need to be proactive too, because this is one of the things that we saw as limitation to lead, that in order for someone to get into the program, they had to first commit a criminal act. Versus someone, I remember a gentleman came to our office, he came upstairs and said, I need help. And I said, okay, well, you don't qualify for leave. He's like, I'm gonna go to the Walmart and commit a theft. Go pick me up, I need help right now. So we had to call a timeout, we had to call again our assets and say, what can we do? They said, okay, and then that's where we went from just the arrest only diversion to a social diversion as well. So I think both have to be recognized as a way for us to resolve the situations, because this could be more proactive where we don't need the criminal act to occur. But if we do see opportunities where we're doing an arrest and we can do a diversion instead, we would much rather see people get the assistance they need versus having to go through that process.
To answer your question, Marcella, too, the methodology did include an analysis of overall time required. So it's not just, the arrest.
So yeah, thank you. So if we dig deeper into it, we would have a sense of, if I actually read the report, I would have a stronger sense of, instead of the PowerPoint, sort of the full amount that it takes from moment of getting called to the arrest. Sorry.
We'll specifically say in the report, they kind of broke it down both with their experience and their how they see things. I think they did be the 600 evaluations of different departments. So they took that experience, they quantified that with qualifying it with how we do our stuff in the same page, and then they made a general approximate time for both reporting and for the process.
Yeah, the report itself is 120 pages.
Yes.
And so
I printed it out.
And so,
I haven't read it.
yeah, there's a lot to dig into and parse through and do it thoroughly.
Do you have any other questions?
No, it'll be very helpful in figuring out if there are additional diversionary programs, how much staff time would it
And
save?
another thing that they discuss here is also the expansion of ARU, which again has been a great program for the police department. Again, reaching out to and partnering with folks who are better equipped and better able to handle the calls for service that traditionally law enforcement respond to, that law enforcement is not the best element to respond to. But they come in because that's how dispatch classifies them, because based on how the information comes in to the caller, it's going to show up as a disorderly conduct, or it's going to show up as a new welfare check. And where again, traditionally law enforcement is going to respond to that, but we're not the best ones to respond to that. Where ARU is to handpick their calls and read the screen and listen in and say, we'll take that, you can cancel that off, so we'll go to that. Expanding that program would be a benefit, again, not only just to the police department, but to the community at large.
Emily, you had your hand up. Did you?
Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. Chief Joy, you just answered my question. Actually, I was going to ask about the ARU and the impact it would have. So thanks for that. And I haven't read the whole report, but that data is amazing. I know we were looking at some of that data early on at the task force of the types of calls. And so regardless, it's super helpful and really appreciate. It's an incredible report that I think is going to be so helpful for your work. And then also just looking at the types of calls. I do have one follow-up, and I think you mentioned this earlier in your presentation, but I had a hard time hearing. Close patrols. I always was curious about the definition of that. So is that, did you say those are like when your officers are out patrolling? So that's like, are those specific calls that come in?
Both. So,
Okay.
so close patrols can come in from a couple of different ways. So if I am a homeowner and I'm out of town and I'm a little nervous about leaving my home alone, I can call dispatch and request a close patrol of my house while I'm gone. They can do that. Or also if.
Do we do that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it comes in as
You're
a,
gonna be getting
for us,
calls from home.
for us, it comes in that comes in as a call for service. Or if, same thing, I am part of a homeowners association or a community group, and we know that there's been a string of break-ins in this particular street or in this particular area, we can call in and we can request a close patrol in this area. It helps if we also identify certain timeframes. So that's how it can come in from the community. That also gets recognized internally by our own staff, where when we have briefings or we get our monthly reports, we can see this area, for the police department, the city is broken down into 10 areas that is split also into north and south. So the areas are assigned, officers are assigned to areas, that becomes your area. So whenever you have free time, when you're not on a call, you are encouraged and expected to patrol your area. And when I speak to my officers, I ask them to make sure that, because I know from my own experience as an officer here, I'll be going through my areas. Sometimes I call it out, sometimes I don't. But what I didn't know at the time, which I know now, is that when I get calls and emails and complaints of a certain address or a certain area, the first thing that I do and my deputy chiefs do is we pull up the history. And when they say, well, you know, police haven't been to this area, this is the problem house. There's drugs getting dealt here. It's a mess. The first thing I do is I bring up that address and I look at it, and I can say, in my own experience, 19 times out of 20, not just 9 out of 10, 19 times out of 20, the information I'm seeing does not support their allegations of the address. What does that mean? Does that mean it's not happening? No, both things can be true, but I need that data to support our response. And what I tell folks is data informs action. And so the close patrols, and this is what I've been saying for anyone who's seen me speak publicly, has heard me say more than once, proactive activity, in spite of everything else, is still our highest call volume that we have. When you look at our call types, it's close patrols and traffic stops. And so those are proactive activities that our officers do when you combine them. So rambled a little bit. That's what close patrol is.
Well, when we get up there about traffic stops.
Yeah.
You'll have.
Anyone
But
else?
the traffic stops are also generally also in response to complaints. And so, yeah.
It's complicated though, because some people just don't call.
Right.
They just don't want it, they just don't want to deal with it or whatever reason. And then also there is this element of misdirected dispatch.
Right.
And that's another issue that we don't have time to talk about, that this report actually didn't address. the dispatch and the issues we've been having with dispatch, which is run by the county. And based on what they report, you all have to go by that, how they code it. And sometimes it's not always accurate, or it's a different
It is
situation.
quite literally the telephone game.
Yes.
Where it comes in from the call taker, from the person making the call to the call taker, that information then gets relayed to the person at the console. That person at the console then relays it to the officer. But yeah, thank you for that, because some folks don't know that dispatch is not employed by the department and they're not employed by the city. They are a regional emergency communication center. They work with city fire, city police, as well as county fire, county sheriff's office, and Edgewood. And when we talk about our vacancy rate, which is roughly around 20% currently, their vacancy rate is close to 60%. And so they're dealing with a lot. They're an integral part to all of us. But yeah, it's a struggle for everyone.
Yes, thank you. I know we're at time, actually. I don't know if there was anything quick that someone wanted to convey about the report, or to our officers or staff. And if there's more questions, or you dig in, because it is a long report, I think everybody got the full report. If you have further questions, we can relay it to staff to get those answered. Thank you all for being here and for sitting with us. We have long meetings. I feel like we never can get through our agenda, but we try. So thank you so much. And I think that's it. Just thank you for all the work you all are doing. And yeah, there was other things I had questions about that I just have to understand this report, but
I can go back.
well, I feel like I need to process it more. Thank you all. Thank you.
Joy, I want to say something to you, and it doesn't have to be on the record, but
It is on the record because it's being
well,
recorded.
good, because I want them to know that I'm gonna say this out loud. I want at some point to hear, because I think that this task force, we've asked a lot of questions, but one of the questions that at some point I would really, really like to have is when an officer isn't at their best and you get a report. I really want to hear how things happened and how we're making right our wrongs. I'm just gonna give you a little bit of information. When we have an opportunity to be in face-to-face with an officer and they're not at their best, right? When you get those telephone calls, I want you to think about this, and I want to share this with you, that it's important to have those conversations. We got a complaint that you weren't at your best, and who do you need to make right with? Because I'll just tell you that it leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. It doesn't take long, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to be customer service. And you talked a lot about that, but I have that sixth sense because maybe I'm deaf. And when someone has those expressions that aren't them at their best, I just want you to know it leaves a bad taste. And I hope that you can share with your officers that we appreciate them, but we hold them to a high standard because they work for us and we work, as a community to better our community.
I think we can talk about it another time, just because
Sure.
everybody's
But I'm gonna
on.
ask you.
Yeah.
You can ask me as many times as you want. We can have that
I'm gonna
conversation.
ask
I have an answer ready to go for it.
Maybe we could, if you're around, we still have some
But I will
business.
never tell you, I'll tell the person instead. That wasn't you at your best.
Thank
They
you.
might arrest me though.
So I think we are going to move on to just anything that we missed at the beginning, since we jumped. Thank you all.
Yep, we're gonna get along.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I think what I'd like to share, or maybe Julie could just let you all know, since we've been chomping at the bit to get this contract done with UNM and our own staff, our own attorneys trying to solve this problem. So maybe Julie can just let us know where we're at with the contract for community community outreach and engagement that we've been waiting for the beginning of the year. And here we are. It's not done yet. So Julie, could you just briefly tell us where it's at right now?
Yeah, so I got brought into the fold in April when the contract was still in negotiations and trying to figure out the language of the contract to make sure it matched with the resolution. And anyways, it was a lot of work. Right now, our legal is in negotiation with the UNM legal in a way that I've never seen before. UNM does not want to adhere to the city's rules, to put it lightly. And then there's some issue around how the compensation is outlined in the contract. And so the city's working on it, our city attorney's on it, and is trying to figure out the best remedy for the issue. So it's been really challenging because in the process, UNM has had 2 different legal teams review it. And when we finally came to an agreement, a new legal group stepped in and started reviewing and redlined everything once again. So that's kind of where we're at. Yeah. And I've been doing contracts for 6 years, and this is the first time I've ever seen this kind of back and forth between our legal and another entity's legal.
And
So-
it's a legal procurement, right? It's also a procurement arm of UNM. It's not the Center
Yeah.
for Social Policy. They have nothing to do with this. It's UNM's.
Their contracts team,
Yeah.
their contract administrator and their procurement legal team, yeah. So, we're hoping it'll get negotiated here in the next month or so. I'm going to be working with our legal team to see what we can and can't allow in those contracts, and then figuring out the best remedy for that.
Have you ever had a contract with UNM before?
The city, not this kind of contract. So
Not this kind of contract. What do you mean by that, Julie?
this kind of community engagement contract. We have done subcontracts with UNM around work in Midtown, and they sub granted that funding. And I don't know how this is necessarily different, but it's not, apparently it's different enough for them to challenge it. So,
For them to challenge it, not us.
yeah.
Yeah, because I am aware that you contracted on the Midwest, on the Midtown stuff.
Yeah.
For a community engagement process. So it's a different department,
Mhm.
not the UNM social or research.
And social
School of
policy.
Social Research. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's frustrating for all of us. And yeah, I just hope that we can, Dr. Sanchez is ready to go. And I'm trying to connect with them so that once that's a green light, that we all can be prepared with the community engagement groups to be able to hone in on what we need to do so that they can start moving forward. So we should talk about that after, maybe with the working groups.
Well, that's one of the things that our working group, that's one of the things that our working group wants to do, is to be really engaged with him on that. And actually, that's why I asked Sophie to stay, because she had mentioned that there was a gap in the community engagement with people that were directly impacted or were in the process, people who were both coursing through the justice system. You said that it was important to engage people about what the family centers would look like and all of that. And so I wanted to say that we still have to undergo this process. So if you wanted to chime in and give us ideas as well about what we would want Dr. Sanchez to do in the community engagement process, that would be great. So.
If there's an opportunity to continue this work, absolutely. I mean, I see this task force and the work of the violence prevention unit really being closely knitted. And yeah, if there's any way that I can contribute, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, and I say that because, and also a reminder for Julie, what we envisioned and what we talked about with Dr. Sanchez is really focusing on engaging people who don't normally get engaged.
Yes. Yes.
So the police get engaged.
Right.
Other practitioners get engaged. They are in many, many reports and in many focus groups and in many surveys. This is purposefully meant for people who do not normally have a voice in these reports. And so that's why I wanted to extend the invitation to you to help see what was missing in the engagement piece and how we can help fill it, since we have this apparently big contract.
That's exciting.
So I think with the, as follow-up with the community engagement sub working group and the alternative responses is kind of tied in. Maybe you all can make a plan, because as soon as Dr. Sanchez can start, I don't want us to have to linger to try to figure this out.
Hurry and wait.
So if we can talk about that in the working group, we can figure out next steps and we can convey that to him.
We'll be talking, right?
And then anything else? Did you want to share anything else, Julie? And thank you. We didn't officially welcome Julie to our team, and we're so happy to have her. Julie has a lot on her plate. There's so much on her plate, and I'm thankful that she's able to help us with this task force. And Julie has all these other staffing requirements for other committees, and that's really hard. And she also has her other directorship job and on top of that. So I don't know how it's working out, but I'm just gonna be like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so just be cognizant of that, and we'll try to integrate you as best as possible. It's so crazy.
It's a catching up, but thank you. I appreciate it. My other big update is per our city attorney's office, we'll have to submit minutes for every single past meeting that has happened with the task force. And so our next meeting, just be prepared to have to approve many sets of minutes.
Do we have to do them individually, or can we do them as a group? Did you find out? Yeah. Hopefully.
I am just saying, doing it as a group. Let's do the time frame and say, okay, all approved, yay or nay.
Nice.
That's what I'm doing. But I'm super grateful to Val and her note-taking skills, because I could just input a lot of that information into our PrimeGov system. So then it's all in there. So, and then we'll be good to go, staffing or following Open Meetings Act and all that other fun stuff. So
we were following it. It's just that we didn't approve them at meetings. So just letting you know, we were following it. We just didn't approve them. Anything else you want to share?
No, I mean, the other thing is internally, hopefully we'll get some more staff. We're at a high vacancy rate right now. And yeah, we'll hopefully get quite a good team. So
yes, thank you.
I have a request or something to share. I will take it down.
Yeah.
As soon as you recognize me.
First, Valeria, if you can, is there anything we need to add that you wanted to share? I was going to talk about the presentation, the quarterly update that we didn't get to do at the last council meeting, which was on the 13th, which, it was miscommunication, but it turned out to be okay, because we had 4 big presentations at the council meeting, and I don't know how we would have fit in to the mix. So it was a blessing in disguise. So the next date, Valeria, I'll just add this, July 27th is our next council meeting, and we will be giving our quarterly update to the governing body. So, and it's done. There's one thing I just want to look at some things. If you all wanted to see what we're going to be presenting, which is the slide deck and the actual quarterly update report, please let Valeria know so she can send it to you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And
Well,
anything,
Answer.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I'm
Valeria.
planning, hi, everybody. I'm planning to share that with all of you tomorrow. And I just want to send out big kudos to Renee and Emily for making it happen at the 13th hour and providing such valuable information to make sure that our quarterly report is reflective of all the amazing work you're all accomplishing. So thank you both, and thank everybody for the collective effort. And yes, please, we have these little windows. So should you have any revisions or additions, please reply within a timely manner so that I can update this collateral that we get to submit on the 27th. And just one more set of really bad news. you're stuck with me till the end of December.
Thank you, Valeria.
Thank you, everybody.
And we need that timely. So if there's something that doesn't sound right, we need Valeria to know before Friday, because we will submit that for the packet material. So it will be ready for next week. Do you have a question on that?
I feel, no,
Okay.
but it's connected to her contract.
Okay. Okay. Anything else on the presentation or? The one thing I want to add before your question is that these meetings, now that we can do hybrid, it took a while to get there. We have this resolution coming through the council that solidifies being able to do hybrids. The thing that I was told that we have to do and have on our agenda next time is actually voting as a body, as a task force, saying that we want to continue our hybrid option for meetings until we finish our work. And then that will solidify it, because right now we have to do it meeting by meeting. It's crazy. So next meeting, which is when's our next meeting?
August 2nd.
August 2nd, we'll have to have an agenda item on our, like, written out, saying that we are actually going to vote on how we're going to have our meetings moving forward. So that's all I'll say about that. Anything else? Okay, sorry.
It's not a part of Valeria's work plan, contract, and we've asked in the past, and it's probably not Julie's either, and it's also not Gabe Sanchez's, but we're gonna need somebody to write this report as we go through our panel presentations and our research and coming up with recommendations. Someone has to create a template for us to put stuff in and then actually write the report with the recommendations. And I don't know whose job that's gonna be.
Well, if you look at the report that Valeria, if you look at the report that Valeria is doing, it actually has like we've been plugging in information, but you're right. Like, I don't know if that ends up being Valeria's job to pull it all in the final report, or with Julie or with us.
I've asked in the past who's gonna do it, because it is it's a whole other job, and you all made clear, including Valeria, that was not a part of her contract, so. I don't know if it's gonna get expanded, or she's gonna be the one to write the whole report, and if she's gonna create the template for us to plug in all of our findings, recommendations, because, you know, we're doing a lot of research on the restorative justice stuff, and we need to figure out, we'll write our own report, but it's gonna look different than everyone else's. Somebody has to consolidate all of that.
There is a continuity issue.
Valeria and I can, we can talk.
We can talk
We'll
about
talk.
that, but we need
Offline.
continuity, because like, even when I put in stuff to put in this presentation, it's a different way of talking about something than like what Emily put in or Valeria. So I agree.
No, and those are just quarterly reports, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the final
Well,
project.
the final project is also a combination of all what we've been putting in those, but you probably haven't seen the documents. You might want to look at them, and then we can decide what we need from there.
Yeah.
Anything else, y'all? Thank you for staying late.
I know.
We'll get this down next time with our tech stuff. But thank you. Anything else from you all on Zoomlandia?
Just, sorry, one little thing. I have a panel that's gonna be on August 2nd, so I guess who should I connect with?
That'd be
Julie?
me. Yeah.
Okay, I'll connect with you about that. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Julie, for.
Thank you,
putting a little
Julie.
Sticker, whatever that's
Yeah.
supposed to do.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Take care. Good night.
Good
Be
night.
safe.
Anybody else need validation?
I think we got them all house.
So I wanted to say a happy birthday.